The ground was cold. The sand pressed hard against her chest as if the whole world wanted her gone. She could barely move. Her arms were tied, her legs trapped under the heavy weight of earth. Only her head remained above the ground. The sky above looked endless, but she felt buried in a grave while still alive. Her name was Sira, and tonight she was no one. The crowd that had gathered around the pit was silent now. They had finished their cruel work, burying her alive for the crime of being barren. To them, she was useless, cursed, and unworthy to carry life. To Sira, every breath was now a battle, every heartbeat a question. Why was I even born? She could still hear faint echoes of their chants. Barren one, barren one. The voices drifted like shadows in her head. The tribe had left, their torches fading into the distance, leaving only the stars above and the cold night around her. Her throat was dry. Each breath dragged sand into her lungs. She tried to cry for help, but the desert had no mercy. Her voice cracked, and silence answered. For hours she struggled between life and death. Memories of her people, her family who had turned their faces away, burned inside her chest. She had begged them not to do this. She had promised to work harder, to serve in any way she could. But in her world, a woman who could not give children was less than nothing. A tear rolled down her dusty cheek. I will die here, alone. I will die unwanted. Then faintly she heard it. Footsteps. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks. The desert often spoke in whispers, wind shifting, sand crawling, night animals passing by. But these were heavy steps, slow and careful, pressing against the sand. Her heart raced. She tried to call out, but only a broken sound left her throat. The footsteps grew closer. From the shadow of the dunes, a tall figure appeared. He was not like her people. His body was broad, his clothes rough, patched with wear. His face carried a beard, silver strands mixing with black. His eyes scanned the darkness as if searching for ghosts. He was a human. The man stopped when he saw her head sticking out from the sand. For a moment, he thought it was a trick of the night. But then her eyes moved weak, filled with pain. He came closer, his boots sinking into the sand. Sira's lips trembled. Please. The human narrowed his eyes. His voice was deep, but cautious. Who buried you here? Her chest shuddered. My people, he frowned, kneeling down beside the pit. Why? She swallowed hard, ashamed even in her last breaths. Because I cannot give life. Because I am barren. The man was silent. The desert wind blew between them, carrying the weight of her words. He saw the rope marks on her arms, the terror in her eyes, and the cruelty of what had been done. For a moment, he hesitated. To free her meant danger. If her people returned and found him helping her, they might punish him too. He was a man who lived alone, far from others, carrying wounds of his own. He had built a quiet life, and danger was something he avoided. But as he looked at her face, half buried in the sand, something stirred in his heart. A memory of his daughter, once small enough to fit in his arms. A memory of his wife, smiling before fate took her away. His home was silent now, empty of laughter. He had sworn never to feel that pain again, and yet here she was, a broken soul, abandoned. Her lips trembled again. Please, don't leave me here. The man clenched his fists. Then, without another word, he began to dig. The sand was heavy, and each scoop was slow, but he did not stop. His rough hands pulled away the earth, freeing her chest, her arms, her waist. She coughed as air filled her lungs. Tears ran down her face, mixing with dirt. When her body was finally loose, she collapsed into his arms. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, but she was alive. The man looked down at her fragile form, and for the first time in years, his heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something he thought he had buried long ago, the need to protect. He whispered, almost to himself, "No one deserves a grave like this." Sira, half-conscious, tried to hold his sleeve. "Don't send me back." The man's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the horizon, where distant fires of her tribe glowed faintly. Then he lifted her in his arms, carrying her away from the pit of shame. The night swallowed them, and the desert kept its silence. But in that silence, a new story had begun. The cabin was dark when he carried her inside. The wooden door creaked as it closed, shutting out the desert wind. For the first time in hours, Sira felt the ground under her body, not sand pressing against her chest. But the weight in her heart was still heavier than any dune the human placed her carefully on an old bed covered in wool blankets. His hands were rough, scarred, yet steady. They didn't feel like the hands of someone who wanted to harm her. They felt like the hands of someone who had worked hard, lost much, and carried silence with him. He poured water into a clay cup and held it near her lips. "Drink," he said simply. Her throat burned as the cool water slid down. She coughed, spilling some on her chin, but he did not pull away. He waited, patient. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why help me?" He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. "Because no one should die like that, not even an enemy." His words struck her like a blade. Enemy. Was that what she was to him? She wanted to answer, but the truth caught in her chest. Her people had told her humans were dangerous, selfish, and cruel. Yet here he was, saving her when her own blood had thrown her away. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of a small fire he lit in the corner. Shadows danced across the walls, wrapping them both in uneasy warmth. The man sat on a wooden chair, his arms resting on his knees. His gaze never left her, though not with desire, nor with anger, only with questions. Finally he spoke. "What did they call you?" She hesitated, ashamed. "They call me Barren." His brow furrowed, a hint of disgust crossing his face. "That's not a name," her lips trembled. "It is all I am." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I lost my wife years ago. I buried my daughter not long after. Do you know what that makes me, girl?" "Empty." His jaw tightened. "But no. One buried me for it. No one called me useless." The fire popped, and she flinched at the sound. Her eyes lowered, but for the first time since her punishment, she felt something crack inside, not fear, but the fragile edge of hope. He stood and moved closer. His shadow stretched over her as he knelt beside the bed. Slowly, carefully, he took her hand. She stiffened, waiting for pain. Instead, his hand only rested on hers, firm but gentle. "These hands," he lifted her dirt-covered fingers. "They're not useless. You're not useless." The warmth of his touch was strange. She had not felt comfort in years. The tribe had never touched her except to push, to strike, to bind. This hand, this stranger's hand, was different. Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But I know cruelty when I see it. And I won't return you to it." Before she could reply, the night gave a low growl. A sound carried through the wall's distant voices, sharp and cold. She froze. He noticed instantly, his head tilting toward the door. "Your people?" Her heart pounded. They will come back. They will look for me." Her voice cracked in terror. "If they find me here, they will kill us both." The man rose, his broad shoulders tense, his hand reaching instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the wall. The firelight caught his eyes, and they burned. "With something she couldn't name, then they'll have to try," he said quietly. Sira pulled the blanket closer around her body, trembling. She didn't know whether to fear the hunters outside or the storm that had awakened inside this man. The footsteps outside the cabin grew louder. Muffled voices spoke in a language she knew too well. They were searching. The man turned back to her, his voice low but steady. "Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, stay hidden." She nodded, clutching the blanket like a shield. He walked to the door, his hand tightening around the rifle. The stranger's hands that had saved her. From the grave now prepared to fight for her life, the cabin fell silent except for the sound of her racing heart. Shadows moved outside. The door shook lightly as someone tested the wood. She held her breath. The lonely father lifted his rifle, his eyes fixed on the door. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for himself. Not tonight. The latch rattled. The door creaked, and then knocks thundered against the wood. The knocks on the cabin door had stopped. The hunters' voices faded into the desert night, leaving behind only silence. But silence was not peace. It was the kind that pressed on the chest, heavy and waiting. Inside, Sira sat curled up on the bed, her thin fingers clutching the blanket as if it were armor. The firelight flickered across her frightened eyes. She could still hear echoes of her people outside, their cruel words carved deep into her memory. The human. She still didn't know his name stood by the door, rifle in hand. He waited a long time listening, until he was sure they were gone. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. He turned to her, his face grim but calm. "They won't give up," he said flatly. Her throat tightened. "They will find me. They always do." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Not here, not while I breathe." The words struck her harder than she expected. "Not while I breathe." It was not a promise of victory, just a stubborn refusal to surrender. She didn't know if he was a fool or the bravest man she had ever met. The night stretched long. The desert wind howled against the wooden walls, and every creak made Sira flinch. She had never been inside a human dwelling before. The cabin smelled of smoke, old wood, and dust. There were shelves lined with tools, jars of dried food, and in the corner, a table with 2 chairs. Her eyes lingered on them. Dust-covered one, but the other looked used. Something about it made her chest ache, though she didn't understand. Why? The man noticed her gaze. He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I built that table for my wife. She used to sit there when I came home from work. Later, my daughter would climb on it and laugh until she cried. Now," he stopped. His jaw tightened, his eyes turning distant. "Now it's just wood." The fire crackled. Neither spoke for a while. Sira finally whispered, "I am sorry." He looked at her surprised. She added quickly, "Not because I buried your memories, because I understand what it is to lose. My people, they were my family too. But to them, I was less than nothing. They looked at me the way one looks at a broken tool. And when a tool cannot work, it is thrown away." Her voice cracked. "They threw me away." The man's eyes softened. He walked to the table, pulling out the dusty chair. Slowly he sat, leaning forward, his arms resting on his knees. His hands, those rough, scarred hands, hung loosely between them. "You're not a tool," he said firmly. "Don't let them carve that lie into you." Sira looked down, her nails digging into the blanket. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of years of shame crushed her shoulders. How could one man's words erase a lifetime of cruelty? And yet, sitting in this broken home, hearing his steady voice, she felt something she hadn't in years. Safety. Hours passed. The fire grew smaller, shadows stretching longer. The man rose to throw another log into the flames. Sira watched him carefully. He moved with quiet strength, each motion simple but heavy with meaning. "Why do you live alone?" she asked suddenly. He froze, then placed the log down. The flames swallowed it, sparks flying. His back remained turned to her when he answered, "Because silence does not betray you, people do." Her breath caught. The words cut deep, almost too deep. She wondered if his scars were not just on his hands, but inside his heart. Later that night, the cabin grew colder. The man brought another blanket and set it on the edge of the bed. She hesitated, then pulled it closer. Their eyes met hers. Questioning, his unreadable. "You'll stay here," he said simply, "at least until your body heals. She blinked. And then? He didn't answer at first. His gaze drifted to the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. Then, finally, he said, "We'll see." It was not a promise. It was not a threat. It was something else, something fragile, uncertain. The night deepened. He settled into the chair near the door, rifle resting across his lap. She remained on the bed, wrapped in warmth she hadn't known for years. The silence between them was heavy, but not cruel. Sierra closed her eyes, listening to the fire's soft crackle. For the first time since the pit, she let her body relax. Sleep crept slowly, though fear still lingered in her chest. But just as she began to drift, a sound snapped her awake. Whispers. Her eyes flew open. At first, she thought it was the wind. But no, the voices were outside. Low, murmuring, circling the cabin. Her pulse raced. She looked to the man. He was already awake, his eyes sharp, his rifle raised. This was not silence anymore. The hunt had begun again. The fire had burned low, its glow now only a faint orange. Shadows stretched across the wooden walls like black claws. Sierra's breath came shallow, her ears straining. She could hear them low murmurs shifting outside the cabin. They moved like ghosts in the night, circling, waiting. Her fingers clutched the blanket tight against her chest. Every whisper outside carried a dagger of fear into her heart. She had heard those voices before. Her people, hunters, cruel men, who followed the laws of shame without question. The human sat still by the door, rifle balanced across his knees. His eyes were sharp, steady, unblinking. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the faint crunch of boots outside and the cold scrape of words too faint to catch. Finally, one voice grew clear, hissing through the night. "She cannot run. She is buried in weakness. The Barren one will be ours." Sierra's blood turned cold. She pressed a hand over her mouth to stop her breath. Her body trembled, the memory of the pit choking her again. The man noticed. He leaned closer, his voice low, calm, and steady as stone. "They will not take you, not from me." Her wide eyes searched his face. "You don't understand. They will burn your home, kill you. All because of me." His jaw tightened. "Then they'll find out how hard I am to kill." A sudden thud shook the wall. Dust rained down from the rafters. Another thud followed, then a whisper, closer now. They were testing the cabin, feeling for weakness. Sierra's pulse raced. She slid off the bed, crawling across the wooden floor until she reached him. Her small hand touched his arm. "You should give me back," she whispered desperately. "If you hand me over, they will leave you alone. I'm not worth your life." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his hand covered hers, rough and warm. His grip was firm, steady, unyielding. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "You're worth more than they ever knew." Her throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was foolish, but her words died in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Outside, the whispers grew louder. Shapes moved past the window, shadows blotting out the starlight. Then came a voice, commanding and harsh. "Human, we know you hide her. Give her back and we will leave you breathing." The man rose, rifle in hand. He stepped closer to the door, his body blocking Sierra from view. "Your kind buried her alive," he called back, his voice strong, deep, carrying through the night. "You left her to die in the dirt. She belongs to no one now, least of all you." A hiss of anger answered him. The cabin shuddered as fists struck against the door. Sierra gasped, grabbing his sleeve. "Please, they will kill you." He looked down at her, his face calm, his eyes burning with something fierce. "Maybe, but not before I kill them first." The door rattled again, harder this time. Splinters cracked under the force. Sierra's nails dug into his arm, her panic growing. She had seen her people fight. She had seen their cruelty. And she knew what they did to traitors. But the man stood tall, unmoving, his finger resting on the trigger. His shadow loomed across the wall, larger than life. Her lips trembled. She whispered, "Why risk everything for me?" He didn't take his eyes from the door. His answer came like iron, "Because once someone risked everything for me. I couldn't. Save them. I will not fail again." Her chest clenched. His words sank deep, wrapping her in both pain and warmth. She didn't know his story, but she knew he carried wounds of his own. Outside, the whispers turned to shouts. The wood strained under heavy blows. Sierra's heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to run, to vanish. Instead, she found herself pressing closer to him, as if his presence alone could shield her from the world. The final blow struck. The door cracked. A sliver of moonlight broke through. Through the gap, she saw eyes cold, merciless, glowing faint in the dark. Her breath caught in her throat. The man's voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for her. "Stay behind me." And then, with one thunderous crash, the door split open. The night poured in, and the hunters stepped inside. The door crashed open with a splintering roar. Wood shattered across the floor, the desert wind sweeping into the cabin. The firelight flickered wildly, throwing twisted shadows across the walls. 4 figures stepped inside. Their eyes gleamed. In the dark, cold, and merciless. Armor of bone and steel wrapped their bodies, and each carried weapons curved like fangs. Sierra froze. Her breath stopped in her chest. She knew these faces, men of her tribe, hunters, executioners, their lips curled into cruel smiles the moment they saw her. "There she is," one hissed. "The Barren one, alive, still breathing." The leader sneered, his gaze sliding to the human. "You should have left her in the dirt, stranger. She is cursed. Now your blood will join hers." The human didn't move. He stood in front of Sierra, rifle raised, his broad shoulders blocking her completely. His voice was low, steady. "You'll not touch her." The hunters laughed, sharp and cruel. "You protect what even her own people cast aside. Foolish creature." But his hands did not tremble. His finger tightened on the trigger. "I buried enough graves in my life. Tonight, I dig no more." The room exploded. The rifle cracked like thunder, fire flashing in the dark. One hunter staggered back, clutching his chest, collapsing onto the floorboards. The others roared, surging forward. Sierra screamed as steel blades clashed with wood and iron. The cabin shook with violence. Sparks flew as weapons struck the walls, tearing splinters free. The human fought with grim precision, his rifle swinging, the butt slamming into a skull, the barrel firing again. His movements were not wild but controlled, each strike meant to kill. Yet the hunters were many, fast and merciless. One lunged from the side, blade cutting through the air. The man twisted, but the edge grazed his arm, blood spilling across his sleeve. Sierra's heart stopped. She crawled backward, her hands trembling, her body frozen in terror. But her eyes never left him. This stranger, this lonely father stood against death itself for her. The leader growled, raising a curved spear. "You cannot save her. She is ours." The man's jaw clenched. He shoved the last hunter back with the rifle stock and locked. "Eyes with the leader. She is not yours," he growled. "Not anymore," the leader roared, charging forward. Their weapons clashed, the sound echoing like a storm through the broken cabin. The spear thrust, the rifle blocked. Sparks flew. Blood dripped from wounds already carved. Sierra's tears blurred her vision. She wanted to help, to scream, to do something, but she was weak, broken, useless, just as they had always called her. Her fingers closed around a shard of wood from the shattered door. It was small, jagged, but sharp at the tip. She held it close, her breath ragged. "Not useless," she whispered to herself. The battle raged. The human grunted as the leader's spear cut across his side. staining his shirt dark with blood. But he did not fall. His eyes burned with fire, with a fury born not of hate but of loss and of something new. He struck hard, driving the rifle's butt into the leader's jaw, sending him stumbling. "Run!" The man shouted to Sira. "Get out now!" She shook her head, tears streaming. "No, not without you." "Go!" he roared. Her body shook. Every instinct told her to obey, to flee into the night. But her heart screamed louder. She couldn't. Leave him, not after what he had done, not after he pulled her from the earth itself. The leader recovered, spitting blood, his spear raised high. "You die tonight, human." He lunged forward. Sira screamed and threw herself at the hunter. The shard of wood plunged deep into the leader's arm. He howled in rage, swinging wildly, but she clung to him, her small body forcing them off balance. Human seized the chance. With one final swing, he slammed the rifle barrel against the hunter's head. Bone cracked. The leader crumpled to the floor. The room fell silent. 3 hunters lay dead or broken. Only the sound of heavy breathing filled the cabin, hers, his, and the dying gasps of the men who had come to drag her back. Sira collapsed to her knees, the shard of wood falling from her hand. Her chest heaved with sobs, but her eyes burned with something fierce. For the first time in her life, she had fought back. The man staggered, gripping his bleeding side. His eyes met hers, fierce and burning. "You're not useless," he rasped. "Never again say it." But the silence did not last. Through the broken door came more voices, distant, but growing. More hunters. More shadows in the desert night. The man cursed under his breath, pulling Sira to her feet. "This isn't over," he said grimly, and as they stumbled into the dark, leaving the broken cabin behind, the desert once again whispered with the sound of pursuit. The hunt had only just begun. The desert stretched endless under the cold night sky. Sira stumbled beside the human, her legs weak, her chest burning. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, shouts carried by the wind, footsteps pounding the sand. He kept one arm tight around her waist, half carrying her when she faltered. His other hand gripped the rifle, ready for the next wave. Blood stained his shirt, seeping from the wound at his side, but his steps never slowed. "Keep moving," he said, voice low but firm. Her eyes filled with tears. "You're bleeding. I've bled before. Keep moving." They reached a cluster of rocks where the desert broke into jagged cliffs. He guided her into a narrow gap, pulling her into the shadows. They crouched low, hidden. His breathing was heavy, rough, but his eyes remained sharp as he scanned the dunes. Sira pressed close against him, trembling. Her people's voices echoed through the night. They were hunting her. They would not stop. "Why?" she whispered. "Why won't you leave me? I bring you nothing but death." He turned to her, his face pale in the moonlight, but his eyes burning with quiet fire. "Because you're not death. You're the only reason I'm still alive right now." Her lips parted. She wanted to argue, but the words died. For the first time she realized this man, broken by his own losses, was holding on to her as much as she held on to him. Then voices grew louder. Torches flickered in the distance. The human gritted his teeth. "They're closing in. We can't stay here." He pulled her to her feet again. But before they could move, a figure stepped out from the shadows ahead. A man, not alien, human. Sira froze. The stranger's face was scarred, his eyes dark. He carried no torch, only a knife glinting in the moonlight. The human stiffened. "You!" he muttered bitterly. Sira looked between them, confused. "You know him?" The man's jaw clenched. "I should have known you'd crawl back, Cole." The newcomer smiled coldly. "You've been hiding long enough, old friend. And now you're hiding her." His knife pointed toward Sira. "Hand her over. They're paying good for the Barren one. More than you've ever seen." Sira's blood froze. Betrayal. A human willing to sell her to the same hunters who had buried her alive. The lonely father lifted his rifle, voice sharp as steel. "Step aside, Cole." Cole laughed. "You don't get it, do you? You're bleeding, half dead already. They'll burn your home, kill you for nothing. This girl isn't worth it." But to me, his smile widened. "She's gold." Before Sierra could react, Cole whistled. From the desert came more voices, more shadows. Her people guided straight to them. The human's grip tightened on the rifle. His body tensed, every muscle ready to fight again. But Cole was fast. His knife flashed, striking against the rifle. The weapon clattered into the sand. The two men clashed, their fists heavy, their bodies slamming into the rocks. Blood spilled, grunts echoed in the night. Cole's knife sliced across the human's arm, but the father's fist struck back, cracking against Cole's jaw. Sierra's heart pounded as she scrambled for the rifle. Her hands shook, but she gripped it tight, turning back just as Cole lunged. With his knife raised, "Stop!" she cried. The human seized Cole's wrist, forcing the blade back. With a growl, he twisted hard bones snapped, the knife falling. Cole screamed, collapsing to his knees. The father's voice was ragged, filled with fury. "You sold your soul for scraps. You're worse than them." He struck once more, and Cole fell silent, unconscious in the sand. But the hunters were already upon them. Shouts rose. Torches burned. Sierra's people poured into the rocks, their eyes blazing, weapons drawn. The glow of fire lit the night. The human pulled Sierra close, his voice low and desperate. "We run, now." They fled again, the desert blazing behind them. Arrows hissed through the air. Fire spread across the rocks as torches were thrown. Flames devouring the dry grass dot, the desert night turned red. Sierra stumbled, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. The man shielded her, pushing her forward, his body between her and the arrows that flew. His blood left a dark trail across the sand. Finally, they reached the edge of a cliff. The ground dropped steep into blackness. The hunters closed in behind them, fire roaring at their backs. Sierra gasped, her body shaking. "We're trapped." The human stood tall, rifle in one hand, his other arm steadying her. His eyes scanned the abyss below, then the hunters approaching. "No," he said quietly. "Not trapped, just one choice left." The fire blazed brighter, the hunters' voices grew louder. The desert night held its breath, and then he pulled her close, whispering words only she could hear. "Trust me." And together they leapt into the dark. The fall felt endless. Wind tore past Sierra's ears, her scream swallowed by the night. Then, with a crushing thud, they hit water, cold, black. The river at the cliff's base swallowed them whole. She kicked, panic rising, lungs burning. A strong hand seized her wrist, pulling her upward. They broke the surface together, gasping for air. The current was fierce, dragging them through rocks and foam. She clung to him as he fought the water with grim strength, each stroke heavy but unyielding. Blood mixed with river water, his wound tearing wider. Yet he did not let her go. Finally, the current spat them onto the shore. They collapsed on the wet sand, coughing, shivering, alive. Sierra rolled to her side, staring at him in disbelief. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, his body trembling from loss of blood, but his eyes still burned. "You still hold me," she whispered, her voice breaking. His lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Told you, not letting go." The desert behind them burned. Flames rose on the cliffs, hunters' shouts fading into the distance. For the first time in days, there was no pursuit. Only the sound of the river and the silence of night. But silence could not stop the bleeding. His strength was fading. Sierra pressed her hands against his wound, tears falling onto his chest. "Don't you dare die. Not after everything. Not after. You pulled me from the ground itself." His hand rose weakly. brushing against her cheek. "You're not Barren," he whispered. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." She blinked, choking on her breath. "What?" "Hope." Her tears spilled harder, hot against the cold night air. She pressed her forehead against his, trembling. For the first time, she understood, this man had carried graves in his heart, and yet he had chosen to carry her 2 days past. They found shelter in the ruins of an old outpost deep in the canyon, far from the tribe's reach. The man's wound healed slowly, Sira tending to him with careful hands. She learned to light fires, to patch cloth, to fetch water from the river. Her body grew stronger each day, her spirit sharper. He taught her to hold the rifle, to aim. 2. Stand tall. "Not because you must fight," he said, "but because no one will ever bury you again." She listened. She learned. The silence between them became something new, no longer heavy, no longer cruel. It was the silence of two souls who no longer needed words to understand each other. One evening, when the stars spread bright above, Sira stood outside the outpost, gazing at the endless desert. Her chest no longer carried the weight of shame. For the first time, she was not a curse, not a burden. She was alive, chosen, protected. The man stepped beside her, his shadow tall in the starlight. He carried wood for a new table, rough planks. He had scavenged from the ruins. She looked at him curiously. "Why a table?" His eyes softened. "Because a table means a home. And I think it's time we built one again." Her lips trembled. She had never known what home meant, not truly. But as she stood there, looking at him, she realized she did now. The next day, smoke rose in the distant, scouts searching the desert. Sira's heart tightened, but fear did not crush her like before. She turned to the man, her voice steady. "They will never stop." He nodded. "Then we don't stop either. We keep moving. We keep fighting." Her hand slid into his. For once, she was not asking to be saved. She was standing beside him. Weeks later, far from the burning desert, they built a new cabin in the hills where the air was green and alive. A place no hunters had touched. The table stood in the center, rough but strong. 2 chairs again. This time, both used. At night, the fire burned warm. Shadows dancing across the walls, not with fear but with peace. Sira sat across from him, watching the flames. Her voice was soft but certain. "They buried me because they said I could never give life. But you." She touched the table, the cabin, the fire. "You gave me a life." He met her gaze, quiet for a long moment. Then he said the words that sealed their bond. "And you gave me back mine." The desert had tried to break them. The hunters had tried to claim her. Betrayal had lit fires meant to consume them. But in the end, from ashes and silence, they built something stronger. A home. Family of 2, and a promise carved into the night. No one would ever bury her again.